Hello there. My name is Pat Bostic. I'm the Microsoft Solutions Strategist at Cargus Systems, and today we're going to talk about demand forecasting options within Dynamics 365 Business Central. We're going to cover off at a high level the demand forecasting that comes out of the box with Business Central. I'll show you what it is, how to access it, what you can do with it. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the sales and inventory forecast option that's there that uses Cortana intelligence, AI experiments, and things like that that become part of Azure, that are part of Azure, and that give you capability that comes back in the form of uh, graphs and charts on sales and inventory forecast. And then finally, we're going to cover off on an enhanced planning pack option that you can get off of Microsoft AppSource that utilizes the sales and inventory forecast capability from Azure, but makes it work with the out of the box demand forecast. So, with that, I am going to switch here to Business Central. And let's start with the out of the box demand forecast. So, I have that saved here as a favorite. And I created one. We'll call it test forecast. I can have as many as I want. We'll call this one Argus test. Let's make it a little bit different here. Just call it Argus. And we will edit that demand forecast. So we're in the Cargus forecast, and you can see here what happens is by default, it brings in all the items that are in your item table. I'm going to make this a little bit wider. And you can see right now, this is expecting a manually input forecast by day. Well, day is not really working for me as a forecast level. I'd rather work in monthly buckets. And I'm going to do this as a net change. And I have different ways that I can forecast here. So I can forecast just the sales item or component for a production forecast, or I could do both. We'll leave it at sales item now. I do have the option to create the forecast by locations. So if I turn that on, I can put location filters in here, and you can see the location field comes into play in the actual matrix. And the same if I have variants that I'm tracking inside inventory, the same thing with that. So there might be variant codes. I don't have any really, well, a couple items here might have a variant code, but yeah, black, red, and white for color for the auto drip light coffee maker. But we're not going to do that either. And we are just going to do this. We're going to create a demand forecast here by month. And what I would do is simply come in here, say, okay, I plan to sell 100, 150 in May, 200 in June, and then back to 100 in July. And so I have that forecast now, and I can create that for any of my items, but it's a manually input forecast. Now, as with Business Central, if I elect to, I can work with this in Excel. Maybe I want to do some calculations in Excel based on these values that come in and put some smoothing calculations in for seasonality as an example. And then I can create an import routine and actually bring that data back into this manual demand forecast within Business Central. So that is one option for the demand forecast. And then where does it get used? So it's going to come into play in planning. So when I am ready to run MRP, and I'm going to come into my planning worksheet here within Business Central, and if I'm going to calculate a new regenerative plan, and again, I'm running MRP here. This runs both master planning and MRP in the same run. So scheduling if I've got production orders and that sort of thing will happen here on a rough cut level. But here I'm being asked for the forecast. So I can select a demand forecast that I have with manually input values like you just saw me do, and then run MRP and include the forecast along with all the other planning parameters like safety stock, min max quantities, things like that, lead times, and also dependent and independent demand coming from sales order lines. Okay. So it's going to look at all that in including what I have as a forecast to give me MRP suggestions on what I need to buy and make. Okay, fair enough for that. So that's the out of the box demand forecast. The next option is the sales and inventory forecast. So, what do I mean when I'm talking about that? Well, let's go into items and take a look. So, I'm in my item list here and I'm highlighted on the Athens desk. And as I scroll down, I can see all my planning parameters for that item. And I've got reorder point set up for that. But I've also got this forecast pane over here. And right now, this is showing me an inventory forecast by month, which is showing me in a negative position. And that's relative to what I'm looking to sell based on historical values, typically going back 12 to 24 months. But where's this data come from? And you can see, I mean, I didn't manually input this anywhere. It's not coming from that demand forecast. Where it actually is coming from is when I click into forecast settings, it's taking me into the sales and inventory forecast setup. And as you can see here, I do have it turned on. I've got things like API URLs and API keys because I've got an experiment that runs in the Azure AI Gallery. And what's that experiment look like when I go there? Well, first of all, when I go there, it takes me into the Azure AI Gallery where it's got a model set up for me to use as a test. I can change this model if I want, add different things to it. But at the end of the day, I've got a model here that I can train, run, and deploy that's going to use my historical data, any kind of AI information, or if I want to go into try and run this forecast with different statistical values or different time series, it's going to take that into effect. And it's taking the information I have here where I have a variance. The forecast I'm going to generate is going to expire in 7 days. It's going to look back 24 periods for history. And I'm going to base it on some of these very standard demand forecasting timeframes. I'm going to run it against ARIMA here, but I can pick any of these. And when I click update forecast, it's going to go into Azure AI, run this experiment, and then come back to me in the form of this forecast here, sales and inventory forecast on what I plan to sell and what my inventory position will be. And obviously, if I'm looking at the inventory forecast based on that sales, I see I'm in a negative position here. Well, I can quickly just come up here and I can create a purchase order to satisfy the demand for any one or any of these periods right here. Or I can run it through through my planning worksheet when I run MRP, and it'll suggest buy options for me as well. But this is great that this calculates this level of detail, but it doesn't do anything to get it into that actual demand forecast that we had just looked at, that I had basically entered things in here. So that's still blank. But finally, the last thing I want to cover here in this quick demo is there are options, okay? We talked about the fact that you could do a forecast in Excel, create an import routine and update that demand planning, that demand forecast worksheet. Or what I like is there's extensions out there on the Azure Marketplace. And let's come in here and I'm going to look at one that I like. It's called the Enhanced Planning Pack. So I just key in enhanced, and you guys can do this as well and check this out. But here's the enhanced planning pack, and it tells me all about it, gives me some screenshots and videos of how it works. Um, that's really the one that I like. And I've already downloaded it, and it comes here as part of Business Central at this point. So the piece of the enhanced planning pack I'm concerned with right now is the enhanced forecast worksheet. So I'm going to go in here and I could forecast it by item or groups of items. I'm going to forecast it by category, and we'll just pick a category here of furniture. I could forecast by location as well. My period type will be month. I'm going to forecast it out for 12 months, and we'll look at 24 months of history. And I'm going to say calculate forecast. Oh, so it's giving me a message. It says Business Central is suggesting you use 15 past periods based on your historical data. Would you like to proceed with 15? Well, I'm going to take their suggestion. We'll say yes. And now I just run through the same Azure AI experiment that I did to show you the little grid on the item card for the forecast. But now I brought that information here in detail into Business Central. So in April, I'm predicting 18, May 14, 15. And you can see here, it's also giving me suggestions on where I may want to change my planning parameters to match up. So it's giving me those suggestions as well as bringing the data that shows in the grid into an actual functioning form that I can say, update my demand forecast. And we're going to transfer that to a demand forecast. We will transfer it to the Cargus. And I'm going to replace all the entries that are in that worksheet. And now, when I go into my demand forecast for Cargus and edit that, now what you see are all this already filled in for me with detailed forecast information that came from the Azure AI experiment that you set up in the sales and inventory forecast module. So that's it for today on demand forecasting. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. And anything I can answer in any kind of questions, feel free to reach out through our website. Thank you very much. Have a great day.